Sound good? Excellent. Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here at another Senior Wednesday at the Museum of World Treasures. For those of you who don't already know me, I'm Keenan Noller. I'm the Education Assistant for Adult Programs here at the museum. I would just like to make a few announcements, just so everyone knows. Tickets are now on sale for the Mott Gala. That's the MOWT Gala for Museum of World Treasures. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year. So it's going to be a fun night on April 26th. This Art Nouveau themed event will be featuring a plated dinner by George's French Bistro, and guests will enjoy an open bar featuring wine, beer, and a featured cocktail, as well as live music with the Bella Dolce String Quartet. Admission also includes access to the silent auction, wine and spirits pull, the debut of a new exhibit called Over There, Over Here, which will explore how global conflict shaped artistic expression during the First World War, and a keynote presentation by K-State historian Dr. Andrew Orr. Take advantage of the early bird pricing from now until April 13th to get your tickets for the Mott Gala. Our next Senior Wednesday is going to be May 7th, to be announced, the speaker for that. So make it to the next one of those. And then also we have Coffee with the Curator coming up before then on April 17th with Jillian Forsberg giving a talk called The Rhino Keeper, How a Kansas Zoo Inspired a Novel. Jillian is a local business owner here in Wichita who previously worked in our own museum's education department, and she earned her master's degree in public history from Wichita State University. Jillian wrote a book of historical fiction based on the true story of an 18th century Dutch sea captain who traveled with an Indian rhinoceros called Clara, who dazzled audiences across Europe. Learn more with us on April 17th at 9 a.m. All right, and today we are delighted to be hosting Dr. Leonard Krishtalka from the University of Kansas. He is the Emeritus Director of the Biodiversity Institute and Museum, and Emeritus Professor of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. Dr. Krishtalka's professional career as a paleontologist and evolutionary biologist previously included the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, the University of Pittsburgh, and the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. In his parallel career as a novelist and essayist, he is the author of the award winner Harry Javolsky series. Did I say that right?
Perfect.
Yes, Harry Javolsky series of archaeological thrillers, The Bone Field, Death Spoke, The Camel Driver, and Native Blood, and a Kansas historical murder mystery called The Body on the Bed. You can get those books today in our gift shop, and I highly recommend picking those up. Professor Krishtalka has led and participated in paleontological and archaeological expeditions in Western Canada, the United States, China, Patagonia, Europe, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And he is the author of the acclaimed book, Dinosaur Plots. Without any further ado, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Krishtalka.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be here in the Museum of World Treasures. It's the first time I'm here, and I got here early just to set up this talk and to have a chance to go through all the floors. So far I've been 3 floors of exhibits. Being a paleontologist, I have a kind of a soft spot for the first floor, where you have a very, very fabulous fossil collection. I would say it rivals many of the world's museums in the authenticity of the fabulous dinosaurs and the other fossil beasts. I have lived in Kansas for 30 years. I had the privilege of being the director of the Natural History Museum at KU and a professor at KU. I got my paleontological teeth at the University of Alberta, where the first season in the Badlands and the Red Deer River, I was fortunate enough to find a complete skull of a Triceratops-like animal called Centrosaurus, now on display. Then I've also had the privilege of doing field work throughout the Western United States and areas in Africa and in China, not only paleontological, but also archeological. I'm a Canadian by birth, but I feel like a Kansan after living here for 30 years. And even when I was a paleontologist at the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, every summer we would drive through Kansas on the way to the Wyoming Badlands, and we would stop to look at the rock chalk fossils throughout Kansas. Anyway, it is a pleasure for being here, and thank you for coming on this beautiful day. I'm going to talk about biological mysteries, paleontological mysteries, archeological mysteries, and the role of science in novels, our role as scientists, to expose and excavate those mysteries for the general public. A lot of them, many of those mysteries, you will never find associated in novels with murder mysteries, but that's my genre. I write murder mysteries that combine paleontological, biological, and archeological mysteries with them. Can everybody hear me okay? Terrific. Okay, let's get started. I have two talks, and I'm going to try and interweave them. The first one is what you think you know about life, which is going to be about 5%. What you think you know about the diversity of life on Earth. That means all the plants and animals on Earth. You only know 5%. You think you know everything. I thought I knew everything. What you think you know about life concerning the tree of life, the kinship of all of life on Earth over the past 3.2 billion years, 5%. What you think you know about life, genetics, the language of life, 5%. And what you think you know about life, specifically the web of life, what we scientists call ecosystems, again, 5% or less. Why am I saying all these things? Okay. Because life as you know it, down in that little right-hand bottom corner, is 5%. Most of life, to you and to me and to all of science, is missing. What is missing? What we can call biological dark matter, which is stealing a term from physics when they talk about dark matter in the universe, because that also is missing because they can't see it. They're just hypothesizing it. It's based on mathematical calculations. It ought to be there, but there's no way to sense it, to feel it, to photograph it. The same thing with biological dark matter. It's the world of microbes. So let me use a physics analogy. Hang with me through this. The universe has a fundamental duality. On the one hand, there is subatomic matter. To us, that doesn't matter. We never see it, we never touch it, we don't feel it, we sometimes read articles about it, and we don't understand those articles. At least I don't understand many of those articles. It's subatomic matter throughout the universe. If you break down this podium, your table, the food you're eating, ultimately, it's subatomic particles, but it doesn't exist that way. It's come together into big matter, big stuff. That's why you can see it. But subatomic matter in the universe, you cannot see and you cannot sense. It's the quantum world that physics refers to, of dark energy and dark matter. And they call it dark because you cannot sense it. It's implied through other kinds of experiments. That's one part of the world, of the universe. The other is the part we are familiar with, the part you can sense and touch and feel and drive, like this Model A Ford. So, the famous physicist Steven Weinberg said the following: our expanding universe is mostly dark energy and dark matter. In this darkness, there is a small percentage, I would have said a tiny percentage, an admixture, a few percent of the whole, which consists of ordinary matter, such as is all around us, that makes up the stars, the planets, and us. A small percentage. The rest is dark matter, dark energy, we cannot sense. The same is true of life on Earth. So biology has a similar and fundamental duality. There on the right is what we would call classical biology, a frog sitting on a tree limb. That's the natural, normal plant-animal world you're familiar with. You can photograph it, you can touch it, you can keep it as a pet, you can see it in zoos, with magazines, and so forth. But then there's the quantum world, microbes. You don't see them, you don't feel them, you can't touch them. And this classical world emerged from at least 3.2 billion years ago, from that quantum world of microbes. How did we discover this? We discovered it through a technique called metagenomics. And that is, imagine you can take a bottle of air or seawater or soil, any soil in your garden, and throw it into a DNA sequencer. And they can sequence the DNA in it. They can sequence the RNA in it. And what comes up is biological dark matter, sequences of organisms that we never see in the sea, in freshwater, in soil, in the air, everywhere on Earth. Quite a view came into view suddenly. Biology got smacked in the face with all of this evidence, genetic evidence of life that they cannot see and cannot sense. It's called the microbiome. It's the microbial world. Here are some examples of microbial life. It's everywhere, everywhere on Earth. It's in and on every organism, including us. It's on you right now, all over your skin. It's in you right now. It's in every organ that you have. It's in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. It's in your stomach. I'll talk about that in a bit. But start thinking about that. If all these microbes are in our bodies, who's in charge? You think you're in charge? Ask your doctor. So microbial life is on every organism. It's in every single environment on Earth, whether it's desert or grasslands or the Flint Hills or oceans. Microbial life, how abundant is it? There's more microbes in a bucket of seawater than all of the individual mammals running around Africa. That's a big number. Let me put it another way. How abundant is it? The number of stars in just one galaxy, our galaxy, the Milky Way, is 10 to the 11th. I can't pronounce that number. It's huge. It's 10 followed by 11 zeros. One gram, this much of soil, a pinch of soil from your garden contains 10 to the 10th microbes, a 10 followed by 10 zeros. And all of those microbes have at least 2,000 to 8,000 different genetic codes. Whereas all of us have very similar genetic codes. Microbial life has staggering genomic diversity, unheard of and unseen in, quote, classical life on Earth. No matter what you think of, worms, frogs, rats, humans, apes, monkeys, zebras, alligators, fish, doesn't matter. It is calculated that 95% of all the genes on Earth are in microbes, not in the life that you are familiar with. Yet we can't see them. Why are they so genetically rich? Because they are, if there's a word that, of course, writers use, it's called promiscuous. But this is promiscuous in a different sense. If you want to relate promiscuous with sex, in a way, microbes exchange genes, which is sex, millions of times every hour. Microbes have sex with microbes. They exchange their genes. Microbes exchange genes to the environment and suck up genes from the environment. And the microbes have sex with the organisms they are on and in, including you in this room. Right now, microbes in you and on you are transferring genes to your cells and absorbing genes from your cells. They are exchanging genes with you. So you think you're in control, right? 65% of the genes in a microbe are constantly changing. If that was happening in humans, we call it cancer. There's no such thing as a species, because a species requires a stable, regulated genetic code. That's why our gene sequence is different, say, from a monkey's or a frog's or a worm's. Not so with microbes. There's no species. And 99% of them can't be cultured in a petri dish. Well, we know about a few of them, E. coli, for example. You read about that all the time. But 99% of all the microbes in the world cannot be cultured. So we don't know them. All we have from them is a smear of DNA. That's it. It's just a momentary genomic signal. Imagine you go to the beach and you have a DNA machine with you. You take a scoop of sand, you throw it into the machine. You get 10,000 genomes. Do it 5 minutes later, you get 10,000 more genomes, but they're different than the first time, and again and again and again. It's very much like dark matter, because the physicists get the same result when they smash electrons together in a linear accelerator, and they say, oh my God, we found another particle, but it's gone. All they have is a smear on a photographic plate. So, to quote Steven Weinberg, our biosphere, life on Earth, is mostly biological dark matter. And in this darkness, there is a small admixture, a few percent of the whole, which consists of the ordinary life that makes up the plants and the animals and us. To recapitulate, in the universe, in the physical universe, 4% of all matter can be seen in the visible universe. 96% is dark matter. In the biological world, 5% of all living things can be seen. 95% is dark life. The remainder in the physical world is called cosmological dark matter, and here on Earth, the remainder is biological dark matter, microbial life. In the universe, cosmological dark matter, according to physicists, dominates the mass energy of everything that goes on in the universe. And biological dark matter, I am saying, dominates the mass, the energy, and the diversity of life on Earth. So, I don't know when the last time any of you looked at a biological textbook. Ask your children, your grandchildren. They haven't changed. There's a lot of diversity in the diagrams up above, the life that we call classical. But there's nothing down there, just a little thicket. Just to put a fine point on this, here's a tree of life based on genes, okay? This is all you think you know about life, up there in the purple. There's a human, you probably can't see it. There's a chimp, there's a mouse, there's a mosquito, there's rice, and there are amoebas. Guess what all the rest is? Microbes, 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 microbes. Two groups of microbes called archaea and bacteria. It doesn't matter. They're microbes. So what you think you know about life? Diversity of life? No, mostly unknown, unseen. Tree of life? Nope, not for most of life. Species? No such thing, not for most of life. And are we individuals? You think of yourself as an individual, right? Well, I'm asking you to think that again. Here's a cover of Scientific American talking about our inner ecosystem. In our body, bacteria outnumber your own cells 10 to 1. They're all in you, everywhere, every organ. Who's in control? Are your cells in control? We are microbial people. men, women. This is just a diagram. We don't have to go through all of it, showing you the thousands, the tens of thousands of bacteria in all of us, in each of our organs and organ systems, including on our skin. So are you really an individual? Or are you what a biologist might call a holobiont, in which we have formed an agreement, a biological agreement, a metabolic agreement, a health agreement with the millions of microbes that are living in us and controlling us? If you ask your doctor, who's in charge? Why do I get sick? Whether it's cancer or rheumatism or anything else, they will give you the standard stuff they learn in medical school. Some of them may nod their head and say, well, there could be a microbial influence. My prediction is, down the road, medicine will be microbial medicine. That they invade your cells, they change your genes, and stuff happens. It's what we call aging. And boy, I feel it. So, I put it to you that the microbes are in control. The microbes, we are the marionettes, and the microbes are pulling the strings. What about our ecosystems? What about the Flint Hill ecosystems, the grasslands, the deserts, the forests, the seas, the lakes? Microbes control, I would say, our air, our water, our soil. They are 95% of the organisms and 95% of the genes in those environments. They control the fluxes of gases and nutrients and everything else. So, at the beginning of the 20th century, we discovered that classical mechanics, the mechanics of Newton, is only an approximation of physical reality. Along came Einstein and others and just said there's a whole other world that we can't see. And at the beginning of the 21st century, with the ability to sense DNA and RNA and genetic material everywhere, we discovered that classical biology, what we think we know about life, is really only an approximation, a 5% approximation of biological reality. In the end, microbial life is half of the Earth's biomass and most of its genomic diversity. We live on a microbial Earth. That's the first part of what I'm going to talk about. Oh, great. But I think I should entertain questions from this part, which will be different from the next part of the presentation. Yes, sir.
What if we make our planet uninhabitable for us large species? Will the microbial biomass survive that?
So
I'm going to wait.
I'm going to repeat the question.
I'm going to wait until
Your question was,
If we were to make the planet uninhabitable for
if
us,
the planet became uninhabitable for us, would these microbes survive such an event?
and would they evolve back into larger forms of life?
It's a great question. If the planet becomes uninhabitable, what could microbes survive? Well, the old joke is microbes and cockroaches. Certainly microbes will survive because they now live in the deepest deep sea vents that produce volcanoes. I don't know to what height in the atmosphere they have been found, but they can survive different microbes, of course, can survive incredible extreme environments. They're called thermophiles. And indeed, they are being studied now. Say the microbes that are found where Old Faithful bubbles up from in Yellowstone. It's an excellent question. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir?
Seems to me the one way to affect your the biomes, at least in your intestinal tract, is what you eat. What do you personally eat or try to eat to influence microbiomes?
I don't think I heard that. Can you repeat it?
So
please?
he was talking about how your microbiome in your gut is heavily influenced by what you eat. And he was asking, what do you eat for that?
You're absolutely correct. Certainly a great part of our microbiome, the microbiomes in our mouth, saliva, esophagus, the entire digestive tract is determined by what we eat. So for example, when you get sick, you get the flu, and a doctor prescribes antibiotics, and you take antibiotics, those antibiotics are not killing just a particular microbe that is giving you the flu. Those antibiotics are wiping everything out. And as you've probably experienced yourself, you then have to reconstitute the microbial. You're probably going to have after that, some intestinal issues until you eat food and the microbial population normally that helps in digestion and metabolism in your digestive tract gets repopulated. Absolutely, yes. So my other prediction when I talk about the future of medicine is microbial biology. In the future, my prediction is instead of taking pills to cure this or that, or to stem this or that temporarily, because most of the pills are just temporary, whether they're pain or this or that. Instead of swallowing pills, we will be swallowing human engineered microbes with a specific DNA code that will enter your body, travel throughout your body, and give you the genes on that DNA code that are needed to repair what is wrong. It may replace some forms of surgery. And I think it's probably one of the biggest, I'm not a doctor, but I would think that it's one of the biggest promises for mental illness, for dementia, for that kind of stuff.
You have a question?
Yes, sir.
Or that what you're talking about right now could increase the human lifespan by a long ways, couldn't it?
I think that extending the human lifespan is certainly possible. Again, but it'll be a genetic solution. It won't be some silly powder that they advertise on television. You'll be swallowing microbes that are genetically engineered to change genes in your body for a positive outcome, positive metabolism, positive enzymes, proteins, and so forth. It's also one of the ways of curing genetic abnormalities. One more?
Just one. What about the microbiological life that fights against each other? Is there anything in there where there's good and bad?
I didn't understand that, I'm sorry.
The microbial life, is there instances of them fighting against each other? She was saying, is there like good and bad microbes battling it out?
Oh yeah, there are good microbes and bad microbes. It all depends on what environment they're on. For example, when you get sick and you get a flu, you may have been invaded by a bad microbe or a bad virus, for example. And they can be killed with antibiotics. And there is as much a contest, I'm sure, in the microbial world, a war in the microbial world between quotes bad and quote good, that goes on in classical biology between different species trying to survive in an environment. If you have a whole bunch of microbes that are surviving well in collaboration, say, with your intestine, should a bad microbe come in, that'll threaten the good microbe's existence. They want to get rid of it. So yes, there are bad microbes, and those kinds of competitions do occur. Okay.
Do we have time for one more question on this before we go
Sure.
forward? Yeah.
I just had kind of on that topic. So like the ingestion of food is one thing, but the ingestion of impressions, the things that you feed your mind, and whether you're under stress, they say stress is the #1 cause of disease. If you're feeding that constantly and the biome is adapting to that fear-based kind of internal stress that you have, that battle could be between having fear-based versus, more a different kind of ingestion of impressions every day that you're giving yourself. I was just wondering how that would work.
That's a good question. It's a good observation. I'm not a psychologist, nor do I want to be one. Right now, people who suffer fear and anxiety, they get prescribed pills. They get prescribed tranquilizers and other kinds of solutions, which we all know can work, but there are also other side effects and consequences. But to me, that kind of solution is like taking a big hammer and whacking you on the head. In the future, I can imagine swallowing, again, a genetically engineered, modified microbe or bunch of microbes that change the chemistry of your brain to feel better and to get rid of fear. Because after all, it's just hormones and enzymes in your brain that are causing that. All right. So let me switch gears here, and I will try and, whoops, wrong way, sorry. Okay. Like I said when I began, we're talking about biological mysteries, archaeological mysteries, paleontological mysteries, and the role of science and novelists to bring this to the public. I'm happy that in my genre of writing novels, I combine what I think are excellent murder mysteries in a setting that involves archaeological and paleontological and biological discovery. You won't find that kind of combination genre in most other detective stories. So, my novels, The Bone Field, Death Spoke, The Camel Driver, my mystery novels, 4 of them, are classified as murder mysteries. And in part, they fit the stereotype. There are murders committed, there are murders solved. There's a private detective. His name is Harry Przewalski. Hard to pronounce. He's named after Przewalski's horse, the small wild horse of the Asian steppes that almost became extinct. He was named by a Russian explorer, Nikolai Przewalski. So it's named after him. The only other interesting story about Nikolai Przewalski in the 1700s or 1800s, early 1800s, is that it is reputed that he had an affair, a terrific affair, with Joseph Stalin's mother. Remember Joseph Stalin, the dictator, led Russia during World War II, after. The Russians have covered up that entire story. They've raided all the archives and removed any mention that Nikolai Przewalski had an affair with Stalin's mother. Stalin's father was a ne'er-do-well alcoholic, and so on. So there apparently is a lot of evidence for this. In any case, as I said, it's a genre that combines murder mysteries with archeological and paleontological discoveries. Let's start with the bone field. In the bone field, which is the first novel in the series, a star paleontologist at a museum is here in the Badlands, digging out on a dinosaur dig, when he disappears off the face of Wyoming and the earth in the middle of the night. The museum hires Harry Przewalski, the detective in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to go out to Wyoming and find him, which he tries to do. There's a reporter at the dig from a Pittsburgh newspaper. She tells Harry, we're alike, Harry, journalists, paleontologists, detectives. We dig up what history tries to bury. And as we all know from the politics of the 20th century, there's always people who want to bury history. Harry chases this missing paleontologist from the Badlands in Wyoming to the museum galleries. By the way, this Tyrannosaurus Rex at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History is the first one ever found. Was found by Barnum Brown at the American Museum of Natural History and taken there. In 1941, the American Museum packed up this Tyrannosaurus Rex, the first one found, the type specimen. The species is based on this skeleton. Packed it up, shipped it to the Carnegie Museum, sold it to them for $6,000. Why did they do that? Well, the American Museums are just notorious liars. They wrote that we did it because we were afraid the Japanese would bomb New York. That's complete balderdash. They did it because the paleontology department was running out of money and they wanted $6,000. So then it ended up at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. When it was first mounted, it had 3 fingers. I'm glad to report that the Tyrannosaurus downstairs on the first floor has 2 fingers, which is correct, of course. In any case, why did the paleontologist disappear? If he was murdered, why was he murdered? Was it because he uncovered a paleontological mystery that in the Arctic 70 million years ago, where there were dinosaurs, there's no plants, There's a little sun for 9 months. How did they make a living? How did they survive? How could the dinosaurs and all the other creatures in the Arctic survive 66 million years ago when Tyrannosaurus was running around there? Could he have been murdered because he came up with a revolutionary theory of the tilt of the earth? You're going to ask, what revolutionary theory is that? And like any good author who wants to sell books, I'm going to say, you're going to have to read the bone field. But I will say this. As behind most murders, certainly in the scientific realm and the art realm, the rage for fame infects great and small. Better be damned than mentioned not at all. It's all about fame. And that was written by John Wolcott, a Scottish satirist who lived in 1738 to 1819. I wish I'd written that. The second novel in the Przewalski series is called Deathspoke. And in Deathspoke, I'll go to the next slide. A University of Kansas dean, the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, is found murdered in her bed in Abilene, Kansas at 8 in the morning. Her lover, the chair of the anthropology department, is charged with her murder. Why? Well, he had just left her room at 5 o'clock in the morning. He spent the night with her. So the police think, and all the evidence is there. There's hair and all sorts of stuff we won't mention. The police think the case is closed. His lawyer thinks he's guilty. He hires Harry Przewalski, who he had read about in the bone field. I need this guy to save me. The dean, who has been murdered, is a renowned archaeologist, an expert on the famous prehistoric cave art of France and Spain, such as the spectacular bison. Who painted these bison on the cave walls? The caves that are 12,000 years old. Who painted the deer? Who painted the mammoths and why? And who painted the horses? Of all the animals in the caves, horses are about 85% of the ones figured. So here's a challenge to all of you. You look at this art, and I'm sure you've seen them in magazines, you may have seen them in movies. Why didn't the artist paint a tree, a mountain, a lake, a river? Clouds, sky. Why didn't the artist paint the outside environment? Why just these animals? And why just two-dimensional? All the same. All of the caves are the same. It's the same four animals 99% of the time. Why? Why did they paint these scenes in the deepest recesses of the caves, where they would have to crawl underground and through narrow crevices, carrying a light, a burning light, to paint the caves? These were not Ice Age museums. They didn't paint these caves right in the front. Why? Was the dean murdered over her new revolutionary theory of cave art that destroys everything that's been published especially in the French archaeological world, since the discovery of this cave art. And they have all sorts of explanations, most of which are bullshit. Sorry. Was she killed? Because she discovered that one of the most famous caves in France with cave art, Rouffignac, that has pictures of 100 mammoths. I've been there. I was in that cave. It has a little railroad that goes all the way down, all the way back to the deepest recesses. She discovered it was fake. The cave is fake. Although if you go on Google and type in Rouffignac cave, you'll never see anything like that. They kept tourists and so forth. And the French will never admit it. Harry visits Rouffignac. And what he discovers, that integral to the mystery is a World War II atrocity in this French village, which is restored, unrestored, which the French have preserved as is. It's called Oradour-sur-Glane. It's adjacent to one of the painted caves. 99 people were strung up on lampposts in one day by the SS. And the rest of the villagers were burnt alive in churches. As one of the archaeologists Harry talks to says, in France, one cannot be an archaeologist without excavating a site with one hand and a Nazi atrocity with another. I'm very honored, I will say this, that Death's Book won the Midwest Book Award for the best science, for the best mystery fiction in 2022. Okay, so if you want to know about the theory of cave art, why did the artists not paint the outside environment? Why did they crawl to the deepest recesses of the caves? Why are most of the claims that some of the caves are, that the caves range in age from 32,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago? So I want you to think about this. That's 20,000 years of painting in caves. Are you going to tell me that in 20,000 years, not one artist was born, not one person was born that would paint differently? That would paint an outside environment, or that would use a different style? Doesn't make any sense to me. But you're going to have to read Death's Book to get the answers. The Camel Driver is the third novel in the Harry Przewalski series. Let's start in 1870. This is a taxidermy laboratory at the National Natural History Museum in Paris, 150 years ago. Look carefully. There's a camel that is being taxidermied, a camel from North Africa. There are two Barbary lions, only one is shown. And there's a human of Arab descent, probably from Tunisia, being taxidermied. Okay? What are they doing? They're preparing an incredible exhibit. The exhibit is called Arab Courier Attacked by Lions. Why are they doing this? Let me explain what this exhibit is trying to show. There's an Arab courier riding the camel, crossing the Sahara Desert. When he and the camel are come upon by two Barbary lions, a male and a female, he pulls out his rifle and he shoots the female, which is lying in front of the camel. The male, meanwhile, has jumped on the side of the camel and is slowly pulling it down. The Berber has pulled his knife out of his scaffold, and he is about to stab the lion. The lion has opened its jaws and is about to bite his arm off. And you don't know who wins. It's a fabulous exhibit. It tells an incredible story. And something like this had never been produced 150 years ago. They produced this exhibit to enter it into the World's Exposition in Paris in 1878, where, by the way, the artist Manet first exhibited his art to great derision. The art we love now, French Impressionism, not then. So our courier attacked by lions is displayed at the exposition, and guess what? It wins the gold medal. In 1906, 30 years later, the exhibit is purchased by this US museum, the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, and it's put on exhibit. Skip ahead to 2020. It's been on exhibit since 1906. In 2020, in the middle of the night, at 3 a.m, somebody breaks into the exhibit, a vandal. The vandal opens their duffel bag, pulls out a knife, and slits the underbelly of the camel, and pulls out a bundle. The police determined that the bundle has shed bits of fiber and flesh onto the sand below. The cloth that the bundle is wrapped in is the same cloth that was used to wrap cadavers 150 years ago when the exhibit was put together. And bits of skin they detect lying near the bits of fiber that have also come from the bundle. And they determine it's from a mummified child. What is a mummified child wrapped in a cloth doing in the belly of a camel of an exhibit that was put together 150 years ago? The museum hires Harry Przewalski to find out what's going on here. The case takes him to Cape Town, 1827, where the creator of the exhibit, his name is Jules Verreau. Let's call him Jules. Where Jules was, as he was 18 years old at the time, in Cape Town, South Africa. He was collecting plants and animals for his father's natural history emporium in Paris. When he was there, he had an affair with a banker's daughter, fathered a child out of wedlock, and left her sitting there. What happened to the child? And while he was there, he's not a nice guy. Jules robbed a grave of an African chieftain who had died and was buried 2 days earlier. He skinned the body, and he took the skin, skull, and skeleton back to Paris. In Paris, he mounted it as an exhibit called El Negro, which was on display at the National Museum and other museums in France. And it traveled to Spain and other exhibits, other venues. Not a nice guy. In many ways, El Negro exposes anthropology's original sin. The classification of human beings into races, with whites at the top, then Asians, then Polynesians, then Africans. And where did anthropology rate the red race, Native Americans? At the very bottom. And that ranking of humans suffused all of society, blessed by science, magazines, movies, art, plays, theater, museums, world's fairs. That's anthropology's original sin. As late as 1977, that was still being taught in anthropology classes at the University of Michigan. Okay. As one of the anthropologists says at the French Museum, talking to Harry, museums tell the bigotry of their time. And as Harry tells the president of the Carnegie Museum when he's hired, it's a dirty business, this taxidermy, not much cultural respect, bodies stolen and sold, people murdered, humans stuffed. The case then, of course, takes Harry to that Natural History Museum in Paris, where the exhibit was first put together. In that laboratory, where he discovers what was buried, what was stuffed into the belly of the camel, and why it is earth-shaking enough of a scientific discovery to commit murder, multiple murders. You want to know what the bombshell is? Read the book. Can I say? All right, finally, Native Blood, the fourth novel in the Harry Przewalski series. I'm going to run through this pretty quick. Native Blood has 4 mysteries that finger together and come together at the end. 4 different stories, 4 different mysteries. Takes place at the University of Kansas, in Lawrence, in Abilene, and elsewhere in Kansas. It starts with a motel. A couple is having a fling, an affair at a motel. She is, excuse the expression, she's on her monthlies, but it doesn't stop them. So he puts a towel down on the bed and whatever. When they're done, he takes the towel, wraps it up, puts it in his backpack, and drives back to Lawrence, where he goes into a shopping center, finds a dumpster, gets out of the car, looks around, takes out the bloody towel, and throws it into the dumpster. Only after he's thrown it in does he notice the sign. Cardboard. Paperboard, paperbacks, please flatten. I will say, so when the garbage people empty this, they find a towel. They send it to the police. That's one clue. That's one mystery. The second mystery involves a biological anthropologist at the University of Kansas in the Anthropology building. He's bludgeoned to death at 7 o'clock at night in his laboratory. His body is found on the floor where there's broken glassware, and his lab has been vandalized. Why? He's been studying the genetics of indigenous peoples, including Native Americans. When his body is found the next morning by the technician, suddenly she realized she was treading on the DNA of an Aleut from Alaska, or a Sioux from the Great Plains, or a Siberian Yupik from Russia, bits of their genomic code extracted from snips of hair or swabs or saliva. That was his work. But the vandals destroyed all that. It's on the floor. She's walking on it. His body is lying in it. Why was he murdered? Who murdered him? Well, there was a protest, a sit-in protest in his laboratory the day he was murdered. That protest was led by the chancellor's son. And guess what? His fingerprints are found on the murder weapon, and the KU chancellor's son is charged with murder. The chancellor, knowing her son is innocent, hires Harry Javolsky to come back to Lawrence and clear him. That's the second mystery. Mystery 3. A KU paleontologist. It's 1895. At a place called 12 Mile Creek, Kansas, north of Salina, a tributary of the Smoky River. He's excavating 10 fossil bison from that cliff face. There are the bison. On the largest male bison, he lifts up the shoulder blade, the bony shoulder blade that he's exposed, and he finds a spear point underneath it. The bison is 13,000 years old. It's an extinct bison. Why is there a projectile point, a spear point, underneath the shoulder blade of a bison 13,000 years ago? Because 13,000 years ago, humans were at 12 Mile Creek hunting bison. This is a discovery that should have revolutionized the world and brought Kansas to the forefront in archeology. It didn't. Up until then, no one thought that humans had been in America any earlier than 5,000 years earlier. But here it was evidence. Somebody made that spear point. It was hunters 13,000 years ago or earlier. 37 years later, in New Mexico, there is a dig near Clovis, New Mexico, excavating bison and spear points, just like the one at 12 Mile Creek. It's now called the Clovis culture. Everybody accepted that. Why isn't, how many people here have had anthropology class and know about the Clovis culture? Some of you do. Why isn't it called the 12 Mile Creek culture? It was found 37 years earlier. Why isn't Kansas getting its due? This is 1907. Here's the guy who found that spear point, allegedly. And there's the bison. He found it in. There's the spear point. There's the shoulder blade. And there is the spear point hanging from the shoulder blade on display on the 3rd floor of the KU Natural History Museum. You want to see it? Drive up to Lawrence, go through the museum that I once had the privilege of directing, and the bison is still on display. But will you see the spear point? Absolutely not. Why? It disappeared. Why did it disappear? How did it disappear? You're going to have to read Native Blood to understand that. Mystery 4. This is the last mystery. The earliest Americans who made that spear point. When did they get here? Was it 13,000 years ago? 25,000 years ago? Earlier? How did they get here? And where did they come from? Well, genetics tells one story. If you do the genetics of indigenous people in the Americas, the conclusion is that they came across the North Pacific at least 13,000 years ago, if not much earlier, from Asia. Because the genetics is very similar to Asian people. So the genes tell one story. But archaeology might tell a different story. Here's the Clovis and 12 Mile Creek, found 13,000 years ago, the spear points. And those are the spear points of Solutrean people, their culture, that lived in Spain and France 17,000 years ago. So some archaeologists, not the majority, because it's not a popular theory, have hypothesized, hey, we have archaeological hints that the earliest Americans may have come across the North Atlantic from Europe 13,000 years ago or earlier. Maybe there were 2 invasions. Why does there have to be a single invasion? Maybe there were 3 or 4. As one of the archaeologists tells Harry, science and art are subversive acts, subversive storytelling. They're the risky search for uncomfortable truth. The archaeology of the first Americans isn't meant to be comfortable. There's also a love story. And strangely enough, this love story starts in this cemetery in the Flint Hills. If you drive up Highway 177, you will see this cemetery, St. Anthony's Catholic Cemetery. Finally, the novel ends in a way that I don't think any mystery novel you have ever read ends. Here's the killer talking to Harry, who knows he's the killer. The killer says, am I missing something here? So who's going to go down for the murder of this guy, the scientist? And Harry answers, well, like I've said, you're going to have to read Native Blood to find out the answer to that mystery and the other 3 I've talked about. Thank you very much for your attention. If I can answer, I know we've run late. Thank you so much for your patience. If I can answer any questions, I'd love to. Yes, ma'am.
Why did you use Abilene?
Sorry?
Can you repeat that question?
I understand, I mean, you know, a Jayhawker here, but why Abilene?
Ah, you're going to have to read the book. No, all right. No, I'll tell you why Abilene. When I first came to the University of Kansas, KU had what was called the Wheat State Tour, where all the new faculty every year would get on a bus. There would be 45 of us, and they'd do a tour of the state to introduce the new faculty to the state and the state to the new faculty. This was the Wheat State Tour. The dean was on it with her lover. One of the stops was Abilene. but there's a reason why it's Abilene, and that I'm not going to give away.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I understood the 12-mile creek thing. Is that true, or is that something you put in your story?
true.
Okay, so
Read the book, you'll
They
see.
found Clovis things, and you talked about disputes, history and so forth. What about the dispute about 25 or 30 years ago about Kennewick Man up in, I think, the state of Washington?
That's a great question. Kennewick Man was a complete skeleton of a Native American found along Kennewick Creek. The scientists wanted to study the DNA. The Native American tribes refused to allow them to do this. The case went to court, where I think it sat for about 10 years, argued back and forth. And finally, they did get permission to sequence one of the fragments of the bones, and they discovered indeed that it had Asian genetic affinities. The problem is that it was either U.S. Fish and Wildlife or some other agency. After the skeleton was found, and while it was being adjudicated in court, they brought in bulldozers and they covered over the site so it could never be properly excavated. So there's no information about the site or the context of the find. That's a great question. Anything else? Yes, sir.
We were talking about the ones that came down from Europe, Celine or whatever, however that pronounced that. Isn't there supposed to be an archaeological site on the East Coast someplace where they found Clovis points? And there's been ongoing digging there. I've been about it here a while back.
If I understand your question correctly, there are a number of archaeological sites along the eastern coast that are producing archaeological spear points and other paraphernalia that are very similar to the Solutrean culture of Europe, and that are older than any of the Clovis that are here. As a matter of fact, there are some archaeologists who have studied all of what is called Clovis and have concluded that there's probably two different cultures. There's Western and there's Eastern. And maybe the Western came from Asia and the Eastern came from Europe. But it's not a very popular theory. As a matter of fact, the people who say it may have come from Europe are accused of being imperialists. This kind of politicization of science is, well, I don't want to use a dirty word. It's awful.
Any other questions? Back here.
One more.
Just wanted to know who at the very top controls what can be put out as fact or hidden, in academia and everything else. I mean, you're saying that there's somebody that is controlling whether or not this can come out and be seen, or is it just what would you say, an organic scientific debate and it just gets put aside, or is there somebody controlling?
That's a great question. Who controls the outcome of the facts or the covering up of the facts? Science is a very healthy discipline with checks and balances. A lot of stuff is published. A lot of stuff is then corrected or overturned. That's one of the strengths of science, is that it is changeable, it is malleable. I mean, stuff I learned, stuff I've published is no longer true, or at least has been modified. So the answer to your question is that stuff gets published, it gets very popular, it gets accepted, and there's a consensus that forms in that discipline, whether it's archaeology or paleontology or so forth. But there's always others who will find contrary evidence and publish it and claim, well, maybe we ought to reconsider. Are they sometimes shouted down? Are they not listened to? Are they accused of political blah, blah, blah? Yes, that does happen. So scientists, like every other field, they're human and they behave sometimes in, I would say, not the most, unsubjective ways, because for science, and as in every other profession, they take it personally. It's their body, their soul, their profession, it's what they've done all their life. And, you know, they have reputations to protect. So there's healthy debate. There is consensus, but there are also challengers to that consensus. And a lot of what I've mentioned today are the challenges to that consensus that I think deserve a much, much better hearing.
So why Hall and Oates?
Sorry?
Why Hall and Oates on your graphic? Isn't that Hall and Oates?
Is
Do
that
I have
Hall
what?
and Oates on
Hall
your
and Oates.
graphic?
Is that not
The
Hall and
singer's
Oates, the
Hall and
musician?
Oates.
Yes, very good.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I love the image.
Okay, just checking.
Just like I love all the other art that I
All right,
put up.
just checking.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Krishtalka.
If you're interested in reading any of my novels, I will wander down to the bookstore and I'll be happy to sign any of the ones that you buy.
Fantastic.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a screen that has the titles of all your novels that you can put back out.
Oh, you have little handouts. I can put those out.
Oh, yeah.
you
There's
want me to hand
handouts
these?
of all the books that we can give everyone. Yeah, Kristen will pass out.